In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 college basketball games happening on January 21st, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Texas versus Kentucky. Rupp Arena on a winter Wednesday night feels less like a building and more like a pressure cooker for visiting teams. You can almost hear it in the warm-ups, the band, the student section already hoarse before the ball even goes up. Texas walks in as the fresh face in the conference, still figuring out how its identity travels, while Kentucky is trying to stamp a very simple message on the court. This is still a blue blood house and visitors are guests, not equals. Honestly, the spread hanging in that mid-single-digit neighborhood tells you a lot about how the market sees this matchup. It is giving Texas respect for talent and coaching, but also baking in the reality that a true road game in this kind of environment is not like playing on a neutral floor. Those little things that do not show up in a box score matter here. The early whistles that are influenced by crowd noise. The runs that stretch from 6 to 12 points because the arena smells blood. The way young guards react when they cannot hear a play call. Texas has flashed that weird mix of wow and what just happened all season. One night it looks like a group that can punch with anyone, running its offense cleanly, spacing the floor, knocking down shots, and turning stops into quick points. The next, you look up and see them stuck in mud in a tight game, possessions dragged late into the clock, and a few empty trips in a row turning into a mini collapse. That kind of personality can be exciting to watch, but it can also be a bit dangerous when you are catching a team that feeds off chaos in its own building. Kentucky, for all its own drama, has started to feel a little more settled lately. They have been through the emotional ringer, late-game madness, a clutch shot here, a wild comeback there, and while that is tough on fans, it is sneaky helpful for a roster learning how to close. In those final 4 minutes, you can see clearer roles forming, who takes the ball, who spaces to the corner, who crashes the glass, and who is trusted to make decisions when everything speeds up. Even the injury issues, which look like a problem on paper, have forced the rotation to tighten up. Fewer options can sometimes mean fewer excuses. Everyone knows when they are coming in, what they are supposed to bring, and how long they need to empty the tank. On the other side, Texas' defense still feels a bit like a draft version of what it wants to be. There are possessions where the shell looks strong, feet are moving, hands are active, and they force something tough. And then there are stretches where opponents get comfortable, side-to-side movement pulls them out of position, closeouts come a half step late, and second chance points sneak in after long rebounds. Against a Kentucky team that wants to shoot with confidence, push off the glass, and let that crowd ride every little swing, that inconsistency can turn what should be a close margin into something that stretches just beyond expectation. The more you picture the flow, the more it feels like Kentucky has a cleaner path to meeting and beating that number. Home court energy, a more defined late-game personality, and a visitor still ironing out defensive kinks all lean in the same direction, even if it will not be painless for either side. As our first pick for this matchup, the Kentucky Wildcats to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Both programs like the idea of playing with tempo, sharing the ball, and letting shooters breathe. You can see it in how they space the floor, how quickly the ball moves from side to side, and how comfortable they are taking early offense looks rather than grinding every possession down. Here is the thing, modern college offenses that stretch you out with 4 and sometimes 5 players beyond the arc tend to drag games into higher totals almost by accident. One made 3 kicks off a mini run, which forces the other team to respond, and before you know it you have a stretch where both teams trade buckets for 3 or 4 minutes straight. Neither of these sides is built around squeezing the air out of the game. They are built around rhythm and flow, getting downhill, drawing help, kicking out, and trusting that over 40 minutes, the math of open shots will treat them kindly. Defensively, neither group feels like a lockdown unit that is eager to win a 40-38 kind of rock fight. There are leaks on the perimeter, occasional lapses in communication on switches, and stretches where both groups can be a bit foul happy when they get beaten off the bounce. That matters for a total because fouls in the second half are like fuel on the scoring fire. Free throws with the clock stopped are the friend of anyone holding an over ticket, especially in competitive games where both teams are still pushing deep into the final minutes. Another little quirk with games like this is how quickly they can snap from comfortable pace to chaotic scoring burst. One big run sparked by a couple of threes, a steal, and a quick layup can swing the total outlook in 2 or 3 minutes. And if the spread hovers in that range where the result is not fully decided late, you often get the full menu: intentional fouling, timeouts, drawn-up sets for quick shots, and extra possessions crammed into the last 90 seconds. It is not always pretty basketball, but it is very friendly to people rooting for points. So while weird shooting nights always exist as the party crasher, the overall profile here still leans toward a game where the scoreboard crew stays busy, where both offenses get their say, and where the number on top finishes in a range that makes a higher total look very live. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Notre Dame versus North Carolina. Chapel Hill always feels like one of those places where the script is already written. Blue uniforms, big crowd, the band going crazy, and the visitor is supposed to play hard, take the punch, and quietly accept a comfortable loss. On paper, that is kind of how this one looks at first glance. North Carolina is at home, ranked, and coming off a stretch where the fan base expects a response, not a sweat. Notre Dame walks in with a record that reads 10-8 overall and 1-4 in conference play, which does not exactly scream public darling on the betting screen. Here is the thing, though. When you look past the surface, the Irish do not really behave like a typical overmatched road team. They want to slow the tempo, string out possessions, and make every trip down the floor feel like a little exam. That kind of style can be annoying for a favorite that would rather run on instinct, especially in a building where everyone in the stands is ready for a show. If this were a pickup run, North Carolina is the group calling next and pushing the pace, while Notre Dame is the group that insists on playing to 11 by 1s. It is not flashy, but it keeps scores tighter than people expect. Notre Dame also has that scrappy, young team energy where they do not quite know they are supposed to be intimidated yet. They have already been through some close calls away from home, took a few punches from good programs, and still managed to hang around longer than the box score suggests at first glance. You can feel that when a team has been in those late-game possessions before, the moment does not feel so huge the next time around. They might not win those games often yet, but they learn how not to fold. And that is a big deal when you are catching points on the road. On the other side, North Carolina's talent and name value are baked into every number you see. The market knows they can blow people out, but it also knows they have been a little leaky on defense lately, letting opponents hang crooked numbers on the board and turning comfortable nights into track meets that stay closer on the scoreboard than they should. That combination, a favorite that everyone trusts and an underdog that drags you into its kind of game, is where weird things happen against the spread. You get those runs where Carolina looks ready to slam the door, the building gets loud, and then Notre Dame quietly chips away with another long possession, another timely bucket, another stretch of patient offense that bleeds the clock. So when you zoom out and think about how this game actually feels across 40 minutes, you can picture North Carolina still having its big moments, but you can just as easily picture Notre Dame refusing to go away, staying stubborn, and turning what looked like a comfy number before tip into something that has favorite backers checking their phones a little too often. As our first pick for this matchup, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. On one side, you have a home team that is built to score in bunches, that likes to push off misses, and that rarely looks shy about taking quick shots when they feel a rhythm. On the other side, you have a visiting team that would love a slower tempo, but that has quietly shown it can get dragged into faster games when the opponent insists. Honestly, that clash can create a kind of tug-of-war that still ends up favoring points. North Carolina's recent form tells a very simple story. They can fill it up, but they have also been giving plenty back. That combination is perfect for a higher scoring script. When a team that wants to run keeps finding itself in back-and-forth games, it is usually because the defense is not putting out fires quickly enough. So every statement run turns into a trading session of buckets instead of a slow suffocation. Notre Dame's part in this is interesting too. They might prefer longer possessions, but they are not afraid to step into shots or lean on spacing when the pace picks up. We have already seen them in games where the bench production jumps, threes start falling, and suddenly a matchup that looked like it might finish in the 60s creeps into the 70s or beyond for both sides. That is the kind of subtle shift that matters for a total. You do not need the Irish to play like a pure run-and-gun team. You just need them to be willing passengers once the game opens up. Then there is the whistle factor. In college hoops, especially in a loud arena with a ranked team at home, you often get long second halves full of free throws. A trailing team starts fouling. The leading team marches to the line. You get those 2 or 3 minutes where the clock barely moves and the score jumps anyway. Anyone who has sweated and over knows that feeling when a game that looked a little too slow early suddenly has a dozen points added in what feels like no time. This matchup has that exact potential because both programs have enough shot creation and enough emotional fuel to play a very physical final stretch. So when you piece together the recent offensive form, the defensive wobble, the stylistic clash, and the way late-game possessions often turn into a parade to the free throw line, it is not hard to imagine a scoreboard that stays busy for long stretches, even if the tempo never looks out of control. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Xavier versus Creighton. This matchup in Omaha has a little bit of everything you want if you like your basketball with some emotion baked in. You have Creighton coming home after that frustrating loss at Providence, sitting at 11-8 overall and 5-3 in the Big East, and hearing all week about how inconsistent they are. Across from them, Xavier rolls in at 11-7 and 3-4 in the league, playing much better lately, but still wearing the scar from that 98-57 beatdown the Blue Jays dropped on them in Cincinnati. That night at Cintas was not some random hot stretch. It was a 21st century art project in ball movement that happened to be televised. Creighton hit 16 threes, stacked up 31 assists on 38 made shots, and handed Xavier the worst home loss in the building's history. When a team carves you up like that, it does not just live in the box score. It sits in the back of your mind the next time you see those same jerseys jogging out of the tunnel. Now fast forward to Omaha. You have a Xavier group playing under a first-year head coach in Richard Pitino, still building habits on the fly, and all of that is being tested in one of the louder home environments in this conference. Creighton under Greg McDermott is the opposite kind of story. Same voice for well over a decade, same spacing-heavy identity, and a roster that basically knows what every possession is supposed to feel like before the ball even crosses half court. If you just glance at the raw numbers, both of these teams score in a similar neighborhood. Creighton at about 78.2 points per game and Xavier at 77.4. The difference is that Creighton is a bit more trustworthy on the prevention side, giving up roughly 73.4 a night compared with Xavier's 75.7, and that gap shows up when you watch late-game possessions. Creighton can get to the right matchup, shrink the floor, and force you into the one shot they can live with, while Xavier's defense still has too many possessions where one breakdown turns into a layup or a rhythm three. Xavier's recent results are lively, and that is worth respecting. They hung 97 on Providence at home, then followed it by putting 89 on Butler, both comfortable wins that looked and felt like a team starting to believe in its new system. But even in that stretch, the pattern is still there. They are at their best in their own building, and on the road in league play they are sitting at 1 win and 2 losses, with the low point being that 41-point loss that lit this whole rematch storyline on fire. Creighton, on the other hand, has already shown us the full range this season, from blowing out Xavier by 41 and racing past Utah Tech by 23 to letting a game at Providence slip away late despite a career night from Jason Green. That kind of variance is annoying for bettors, but it is also exactly the kind of profile that can stretch a margin when things click, because the ceiling on their good nights is genuinely uncomfortable if you are holding the other ticket. The market has responded to all of that by putting a pretty healthy number out there, with Creighton sitting around an 8-point favorite depending on where you look. That is not a casual badge of respect. That is the book saying the blowout in Cincinnati was not a complete fluke, and that on a neutral day, the gap between these two rosters, these two schemes, and these two coaching situations still leans blue and white. So when you stack up the recent form, the emotional baggage of the last meeting, the steadier defensive profile, the home court in Omaha, and the fact that Creighton has already handled being in this favorite role multiple times this year, it points us in one direction for the spread. As our first pick for this matchup, the Creighton Blue Jays to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Both of these teams love to share the ball, and that matters when you are thinking about a number in the mid-150s. Xavier is sitting over 19 assists per game on the season, one of the top marks in the country, which is basically a giant neon sign that says they are going to keep hunting for the extra pass instead of settling. Creighton is not far behind, living in that 16 assists per game zone, and when both sides are comfortable stringing passes together, defenses get stretched, closeouts get a half step late, and suddenly every possession has 3 different ways to turn into points. Then you add in the three-point math. Creighton is knocking down just over 10 threes per game, Xavier right behind them with almost 10, and neither team is shy about letting it fly from deep. We already saw what that looks like when the Blue Jays get rolling. They went 16 for 33 from beyond the arc in that first meeting, and it did not feel like some wild outlier because so many of those shots were clean, in rhythm looks created by movement, not hero ball. Recent game logs also paint a clear picture of how fast this can get loose. Creighton's last 3 Big East games have landed on totals of 181 against Georgetown, 181 again at Providence, and 155 in that Xavier blowout. So even when they defend at a high level, the pace and shot profile keep the overall scoring in a pretty spicy range. On the Xavier side, that 97-84 win over Providence and the 89-75 victory over Butler sit in that same bucket. Games where their passing and tempo turned into track meets more than rock fights. The posted total for this rematch is sitting right around 155.5, which is almost exactly what you get if you just mash their season scoring averages together and walk away. But that simple math does not really account for how these specific rosters interact. You have 2 teams that both like to push after misses, both rely heavily on the 3, and both move the ball too well to let the other side lock in for 40 straight minutes. Another little wrinkle here is the foul and free throw component. Xavier's defense has had stretches in league play where they struggle to keep drivers in front, which means late help, which means whistles, and Creighton is happy to stack points at the line if the game turns even slightly chippy. Flip it around, and Creighton's defense has been better lately, but they are not some shutdown unit that smothers every trip, especially with some front court depth pieces on the shelf, so they will give up their share of trips to the stripe as well. Put all of that into one pot, the assist-heavy styles, the volume of threes, the recent history of both teams playing games that balloon into the 170s and 180s, and a total that is only asking these teams to play somewhere near their normal offensive level, and you get a scoreboard outlook that leans toward another entertaining, high-possession evening. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Mississippi State versus Texas A&M. Texas A&M at home has that big, slightly intimidating look on the schedule, the kind of game that makes casual bettors reach for the favorite almost on reflex. They have the loud building, the national spotlight feel, the fast-scoring offense that looks great on highlight reels, and a reputation that has grown quickly this season. So the books hang a spread that asks you to swallow something in that 7.5-point neighborhood, and on the surface it feels pretty reasonable. Here is the thing, though. When you peel back the logo and the noise and just think about how these 2 teams actually play across 40 minutes, that number starts to feel a little rich. Texas A&M is very good, no question, but their typical margin and the way their games flow line up more with a solid, mid-single-digit favorite than a team that should be cruising to an easy double-digit win. Mississippi State, on the flip side, is not some slow, overmatched underdog that is hoping to keep this in the 50s. They can score, they are comfortable in games where both sides trade punches, and their usual results tend to land right in that uncomfortable zone where every possession around the spread suddenly matters. Honestly, part of the reason this line is stretched is because Mississippi State has burned people lately against the number. That ugly run against the spread lingers in the back of bettors' minds, and the market nudges a little further toward the shinier home team. But that kind of skid has a funny way of creating value. You get a few extra points baked in, not because the matchup demands it, but because the narrative does. If you look at how these 2 have met over the years, the story is not automatic blowout. These teams tend to land in that scrappy, closer than expected range, the sort of contests where a 6 or 7 point head start survives a late push more often than you would think. That does not guarantee anything tonight, of course, but it does tell you that the gap between the brands is often bigger than the gap on the floor. One of the sneaky parts of this matchup is how Texas A&M uses its bench. They run a deep rotation, they get great production from their second unit, and that keeps the tempo high and the energy up. It is fantastic if you are an Aggie fan who loves pace, but it can quietly open the door for late swings. When the minutes are spread out and different lineups roll through, focus can drift for a few trips. That is where an underdog that keeps competing, keeps attacking, and refuses to go away can slide in the back door with a final minute bucket. Both sides come in decent shape physically, with no dramatic injury lottery driving the edge either way. So what you are really betting here is not some medical report, but a classic spot where the crowd and the market might be a step ahead of the actual difference between the teams. It is one of those hold your nose, trust the number, and live with the swings kind of plays, where you are asking the road team not to be perfect, just stubborn. As our first pick for this matchup, the Mississippi State Bulldogs to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Texas A&M games have basically turned into track meets this season. They score in bunches, they give up their fair share, and their contests often look more like a sprint than a chess match. You do not even have to be deep into analytics to feel it. Just check a few recent final scores or watch a couple of stretches on ESPN, and you see possessions flying, shots going up early in the clock, and very little appetite for sitting on the ball. Mississippi State, for their part, is not dragging anyone into the mud either. They put up plenty of points, they allow enough on the other side, and their road games have had a habit of turning into higher scoring affairs. There is something about being away from home, the different backdrop, the change in rhythm, that often leads to a few extra threes going up and a little looser feel from both teams. So instead of a cold, careful tempo, you get a game that breathes a bit more, which is exactly what an over ticket wants. You might look at some older meetings between these two and see totals that stayed under, and that is fair to note. But those matchups came in a different stylistic phase, with a slower pace and a more grind-heavy identity on both sides. The current version of Texas A&M, especially, plays with a very different gear. The modern game leans into space, pace, and three-point volume, and this matchup fits that broader trend nicely. Another small but important point is how both teams are comfortable playing from behind or in a tight game without panicking. That usually means fewer "let us dribble this out and go home" endings and more real possessions right up until the last buzzer. When you are on an over, you want fouls late, quick shots if someone is chasing, and both coaches willing to trust their offense. This setup checks those boxes. So when you stack it all together, you have two teams that can score, two defenses that are not exactly putting a lid on the rim, and a rhythm that leans more toward a race than a crawl. It is not hard to imagine stretches where both sides trade trips in the 8 to 10 point per 4-minute range, and a few of those bursts are how you sail over a big total. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.